So as a teenager, probably when I was 13 or 14, I remember wanting to sit at the adults' table rather than the kids. So I think I was pretty eager to listen and be part of the discussion and join the adults. I think I probably found the adults' conversation a little bit more interesting, and maybe I thought I was a bit grown up as well. So this was all good until I went to a lunch one day with my mum and some of her friends, and I couldn't follow the conversation on euthanasia. Were they talking about young people in Asia? I really had no idea. And I think we all experience this at different times in our lives when we sit in the in-between of seasons. So that's why I've got this quote up on the screen, being a teenager. When you're too young for half the things you want to do and too old to do the other half. And I think this speaks to the awkwardness of the in-between of being a teenager. And in some ways, this passage that we're looking at today, Romans 8, 18 to 30, is similar. We see this tension of being of the world and experiencing this groaning, yet awaiting the new creation. So we're going to today look at both the groaning and kind of go into that and what it means to groan, but then also look forward to this new creation and what it means to live in anticipation and live in light of that. So I first start with thinking about groaning. So the first point I love to highlight is that in the passage we see creation groan, we see ourselves groan, and we see the Spirit groaning. So the passage starts off actually by kind of saying, consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. For creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. So we're waiting for something pretty amazing, but in that waiting, that anticipation, we see this groaning. So in verse 22, we see the whole of creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up until the present time. And in verse 23, we see we ourselves, not only so, but we ourselves groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship, the redemption of our bodies. And then in verse 26, we see the same way the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. So it's not just one thing. It's not just creation groaning. It's creation. It's us, the Spirit groaning, longing for something more. So on the side here, I've actually got a picture of one of Michelangelo's quite famous statues, and this is called the Atlas Slave, and it's part of a series dubbed Prisoners. I actually had a look at home. I've actually got a book there, of a few of these. So there's actually 4 different statues in this series dubbed Prisoners. I quite like this particular one because I think it really helps capture something of the weight of the groaning. So this is a statue of a slave not yet free, and it captures this heaviness, this physical weight. And I think something of groaning is that it is highly bodily. We feel it. We actually feel this groaning in the same way that creation does, this heavy groaning, and the same way the Spirit does as well. We feel it, and that feeling is actually quite highly bodily. But the other thing about groaning is that it's not just groaning for groaning's sake. Groaning and eager anticipation kind of go hand in hand together. This struggle and hope just fit so beautifully together, which I find a real encouragement from this passage. So in verse 23, we see not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption to sonship. So as we groan inwardly, we also wait eagerly for what's ahead. I think this is just beautiful. In this groaning, we see creation, we see ourselves, and we see the Spirit longing for the kingdom, longing for the full restoration of God's world. And it's longing because it's connected to hope. And this groaning is not just groaning for groaning's sake, it's groaning with a purpose, with something ahead, something in future in sight. So I thought I'd just share a quick example of how groaning has kind of been experienced throughout Tia's work this year. So for Tia this year, we've actually had to make some really big shifts in light of COVID, because COVID has impacted all our partners across Asia and in many parts of Africa as well. So for all our partners in Asia, they've had to redirect and reprioritise funding to emergency relief work just to provide food for families that are on the margins. So when some of the lockdowns happened, it meant that millions of workers across many parts of Asia suddenly were left without work, particularly daily wage workers and also migrant workers that then had to suddenly travel a long journey home. So what we were seeing is that at the start of this COVID outbreak, risk of dying from hunger posed a greater risk of COVID at some of the most poorest and marginalised communities that we work with. So TIA has been responding, and we continue to do this because this still continues to impact our partners. So here is just a photo of our partners in India, NICORD, and they're providing food relief here to 65 vulnerable families. So yeah, we've been kind of standing alongside our partners, feeling with them this groaning as this continues to unravel. But the second point I wanted to make about this passage is that is kind of around how we live in anticipation, how we live in anticipation in light of what's ahead. So this first verse, verse 18, our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. It's just remarkable that there's this, God is doing this work of revealing his glory in us. And in his kind of work to liberate creation and redeem our bodies. So the first thing is that creation is actually waiting, which I love, that creation is waiting for us, the children of God, to be revealed in verse 19. There's actually, this beautiful thing that we are being made children of God as we await this future glory. And this future glory is the redemption of our bodies and the liberation of creation. But I guess as we live in this anticipation, what does it look like practically? Well, it actually means that we need to embody something of that future glory. And I guess like a teenager, as they go, become more of a teenager and transition into adult, embodying parts of what it means to be an adult. Even though there's a bit of awkwardness in that in between, they begin to embody something of what it means to be an adult. In the same way, Christ is actually calling us to embody something of his future glory. This future glory where we see creation liberated, this amazing glory in us. And I think to be glorified actually is to be made like Christ, which so well just is beautifully captured in the final few verses. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. So God is making us more and more like him. And it finishes off with, and those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. And I think to be glorified is to be made more and more like Christ, which means embodying something of the future, even though we live in the present and the tension of this in between, as a kind of longing and awaiting what's ahead. And I think as we live in the groaning, it actually means living differently today. Even though the groaning is heavy, actually we are called to step into the future glory that awaits us and participate in this restoration, this making of all things new. So what I'd thought I'd do now is actually just share a couple of examples from TIA's work of where we see some of the communities and partners that we work with embodying the future glory. I just love sharing these examples because there's so much so much I see, I guess, of Jesus at work in these examples. So the first one I wanted to share is one of our partners in India. So this is the One Community Women's Health Committee. They were formed in April 2017. So just 2 years ago, actually, they had started having a rubbish dump. The rubbish dump was started 100 metres from the nearest house in their community. And this group originally formed to address health issues, but they realised that this rubbish dump was actually having severe health impacts on their children, on families, on their community. So one woman shared, she said, "We're so close to our homes. Dead animals are dumped there, as well as burning plastic, and the smell is so bad. Since the dumps started, the number of flies and mosquitoes have increased dramatically." So what these women did is they actually worked to advocate to local government, and they've organised a number of different roadblocks, and they're continuing to do that to bring about something of a future glory in their own community. This other example is of Prey Lang Forest in Cambodia. This is up, as you can see on the map, up in the northern area of the country. And on the right-hand side, you can see some of the deforestation that has happened, continued to happen over the last 20 years or so. And this has been largely through illegal logging and illegal activity in the forest. So this forest is a really key kind of environmental area for a number of different reasons, both for economy and food security, but it also helps to regulate the local weather systems and also helps to mitigate climate change, as the forest is a big carbon sink and stores a lot of carbon in the soil. But between the years of 2013 and 2016, deforestation tripled. And in 2016 alone, 100,000 hectares were cleared illegally. And that was even in the year it was declared a wildlife sanctuary. And the other factor is that there are 250,000 Khoi people, other Indigenous groups that live around the forest. And it is a key area for them as well. So in response to all this, we've actually been working in 2001, those living in and around the forest formed something called the Prey Lang Community Network, and they work to protect the forest from land grabbing and large-scale logging. So today they're quite a well-organised group. So this is a picture of some of them here, and they conduct regular forest patrols to collect data on the state of the forest and on any other illegal activities. So there's about 400 active members of the Prey Lang Community Network that volunteer their time to do this. But over the years, as they kind of were growing, they encountered more and more illegal loggers when they were going out and doing their forest patrols. And in many cases, they were actually coming across some violent encounters as they did this, and that made it unsafe for women to take part and things like that. So in 2015, Peace Bridges organisation, which is another partner that we work with in Cambodia, they actually began working with the Prey Lang Community Network and training them around active non-violence. Which has been amazing. So actually many members of the Prey Lang Community Network say that has been transformational. And I just love that, because I think this is such a beautiful example of embodying something of the future glory, and so like Jesus, right? And going about it in a beautiful, non-violent way, and actually having the tools to do that as they protect this forest. So, yeah, so I guess I might just finish it with actually sharing, well, what do we do? What do we take from all this? And I thought one application is, as we sit in the in-between, there is still that awkwardness, I guess, like teenagers, where we're still trying to kind of work out how we sit in this in-between of, we have been made new, we have been saved in Christ, but the full glory, the full future glory is we're still awaiting, and we sit in that anticipation. I think one key thing we can do is actually to come alongside those who are groaning right now. So there are so many people around the world, both locally and through TIA's international partners and many others around the globe, who are groaning right now. There is great need in our world. And we can come alongside those who are impacted by structural inequality and poverty. We can come alongside those who are experiencing the effects of climate change most severely. And we can come alongside those on the margins who need voice and agency. By coming alongside them, we can actually call for change for those who are groaning. So actually, what I've got, next slide, great. So one way you can actually call for change is this new campaign that some of you may have seen, Christians Together for Climate. So it's a collaboration between Common Grace and TIA. And this is kind of one way we can come together and call for change of those who are groaning, who are experiencing the effects of climate change most severely. So it's one way we can actually call in our politicians. So you can get involved and actually form a group locally to engage a politician and kind of say, we as Christians care about tackling the climate crisis, and we would like to see our parliament do more to enact change. Yes, there are many ways we can come alongside those who are groaning, but I think it is just a beautiful vision that step into, that there is this beautiful vision set out that all things will be liberated, all things will be made new, creation will be set free. And it's not just about waiting for that to come, it's actually about actively participating in the work that God is doing in bringing about his future glory. Great, so I might just pray for us as we finish. Yeah, Father God, I just thank you so much. That we have the opportunity to come together and share today. I thank you for the work that you're already doing throughout the world, through your people, through your church. Lord, you do see those who are groaning. You know them by name, Lord. And I ask that you give us the heart to come alongside them, to know their story, to find a way to be a voice and to seek change to those who are experiencing this groaning throughout our world. But also pray that you would set that future vision, that future glory in our hearts, that we may live today in light of what's ahead. And we thank you for all that you've done in enabling us through your Spirit to live in light of your future glory. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.